Hey, this is Victoria from Merlin's Vault, and today I'm going to be covering Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, Book 1. So this covers the first portion of what Alan Moore wrote regarding the Saga of Swamp Thing. He started writing this in 1982, and he did about, 56 issues in total for Swamp Thing. This one is just covering issues 20 through 27. But I have read some other Swamp Things, not read Alan Moore's yet. I have read a few of his other works and thought might as well get started on this one. So I'm just going to put in right now that this is a DC Black label, meaning that it is a more mature comic book. It does go through more provocative themes. It's not lighthearted. It's definitely not. But if you are at all questioning whether or not you should read this, maybe you should talk to someone first before you do. I think it's great. This has a little bit of an older feel to it. I know 82 is not that long ago, but at the same time it kind of is. So I did get that feeling that it's not quite as clean cut. There's much more of the actual pencil work that you can see in here, and I really like that feel to it. It gives that almost like a grittier feel to the comic book. There's not a lot else I can say without spoiling it, so I'm gonna just jump right in. This is your official spoiler warning. So within this one, there are several different issues, obviously, because this is a volume. And the first one is titled Loose Ends. It starts out with Swamp Thing, who is questionable there. Alec Holland. Something has happened to him. You don't get a ton of background in the very first issue, but there are men chasing him, after him, and they're trying to kill him. He takes out quite a few of them. But he keeps talking about how there isn't any darkness left for monsters like him to hide. And I felt like that was one of the first themes and comments on society that Alan Moore brings in on this run of Swamp Thing. I like that. There isn't. I feel like there's the over-industrialization. We are grabbing up all of the environment that we can. Where I live, we are pretty much landlocked, as you can say. Our city can't grow any further outside of its physical boundaries because there isn't any other land to grab. And now they're going back through and tearing down old buildings to build high-rises, multi-story level buildings because there isn't any more land. And I think some of that is being talked about in here. Then it goes into chapter 2, the anatomy lesson. And in this one, we are introduced to Dr. Woodrow. And he is very dark and very creepy and doing the full-on, I'm sinister and I'm going to stand in front of a window with the rain pouring down while I drink some alcohol look. So he's super edgy. He is working with this big business corporation guy who keeps bragging about how he can do everything from his office and just hit these buttons and it all gets taken care of. So there's minimal security within there. We find out that Swamp Thing, or Alec Holland, is frozen. Basically, he's been put into this chamber by this big business guy. So we find out that clearly he did not make it out of the first chapter fighting against all those men. So he's stuck in there. Woodrow is doing experiments on him, and he's so fascinated by Swamp Thing because, one, he knows Alec from before, and two, he has a secret of his own. So he is part plant. It's a little questionable on that. You can see Swamp Thing is actually in that chamber. And Woodrow is doing experiments. Well, he comes to the conclusion, which I find this to be very fascinating, as somebody who likes to study mycelia in their free time. I love plants. My favorite comic book character is Poison Ivy, and I'm also a vegan. Woodrow figures out that Alec Holland actually died, and the plants that fused around him are believing that they are still Alec. So the plants themselves are simulating breathing and a heartbeat when actually, yes, there looks to be lungs inside of him, but they're not actually breathing for him. They're just simulating it, which I thought was so cool. So meaning Alec's dead. Swamp Thing is not Alec Holland. It thinks it is. It has the mindset and the memories, so it still knows some people, his friends, but it's not really him anymore. Woodrow leaves his journal in the old man's office. We do find out that Woodrow is also called the Floronic Man. So there's something going on with him that also looks very plant-like, and he sprays the skin over himself, so it does look, he makes himself look like a normal person. He doesn't quite look like Swamp Thing though without the skin. He looks to be different. Different plant thing. But fairly close. Fairly close. Okay. So then he hits the buttons, shuts down the whole facility, gets Swamp Thing out of his containment area, which then Swamp Thing reads the journal and realizes that he is not human. He's not Alec. So that part of him completely loses his humanity. It does make him a little bit crazy, and obviously you could understand that. I think that's the part where he has a huge shift and he becomes a completely different character. He is no longer Swamp Thing as Alec Holland. He is now truly the Swamp Thing. And you see a shift in how he interacts with people, how his mindset changes towards his surroundings, and he does take it out on the old man. He does end up back into the swamp area in Louisiana. Chapter 3 is called Swamped. And this one, you meet the Cables. So Mr. and Mrs. Cable. Matt has some stuff going on with him. Matt Cable does. And his wife, Abby, she is very close to Alec and is looking for him. They're friends, but she is very concerned about him. And Matt, we're introduced to, he definitely has a drinking problem. He could potentially have something more than that. He does see visions when he does drink. So I don't know if he has some sort of mental illness that is not helped by the alcohol, or if truly he's just drinking that much that he's starting to see things. But Abby doesn't want to be around him. She wants to spend her time out in the swamp looking for Alec, being around Alec. And I mean, I kind of get it, because Matt's just drinking all the time and he seems super needy and just obnoxious. Like, if it was me, I would have left him. I'm like, girl, you can do better. Although, not a true fan of Abby either. She's a bit whiny. I guess I like, so let's slow down there. I guess I prefer my female characters to have more initiative. She seems to let things happen to her and doesn't do much about it. It's always she's turning to a male character to save her. She does get a little bit better as this goes on, but she's not going to be ranked in my female characters that I love. I'm definitely not going to be cosplaying as her. So they end up meeting the Floronic Man, aka Mr. Woodrow. Sorry, Dr. Woodrow. And he points them over to where Alec, Swamp Thing, has resided. So Alec has allowed himself to basically grow into the earth itself. He is no longer breathing. He's not responsive. It's almost like he's given up, because he doesn't have that humanity that he thought he did. He doesn't have a purpose any longer. So he's just let the earth retake him. And there is some dreaming sequences going on. Abby's crying. She cries a lot in this. And then it goes back to the Floronic man. So he has now been unleashed. He was in jail, but because he was doing work with the old guy, he got to be released. And upon killing him, he has fled and gone down to Louisiana. His plan now is to take over the world. So he says he can feel the plants all over the world, and they are telling him what to do next. He takes out some townsfolk in the outskirts of town, and then he goes into the town in his full Floronic man persona and tells them all to go into their houses, and then he makes the plants inside their homes increase their oxygen levels and then sets fire to all of the houses. His plan is truly to wipe out humanity along with animals. And y'all are gonna think I'm crazy saying this. I can see how his frame of mind came about. He is seeing humans destroying nature and obviously plants within that. One guy comes up with an axe and he's like, oh, great idea. I'm gonna take you down just the way that you take down the trees, Mother Nature. And again, I can see how that he's upset by that. I do as well get very upset, particularly with what we're doing to the rainforest and destroying our home, the earth. But at the same time, you can't just take away all the other living things outside of the plants, which we see the Justice League. They're out in space on their station and they're all contemplating what it is that they're going to do about this Floronic guy. And they're like, well, we beat him before. Like, what's the big deal? And they're spitballing different ideas and they're all like, no, that's not going to work because of this. That won't work because of that. They can't figure it out, but it's Swamp Thing that does. He is finally awakened because Abby's being attacked. So now he gets his butt up and he's going to do something about it. And he brings up the idea that plants take in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen. So what is going to be giving the carbon dioxide to them if there are truly no animals living? And that breaks Floronic man's whole perspective on his plan to take over, which I thought was a great idea. Because I, as well, can get frustrated with what we do as humans. I do think that we are very destructive, more so than any other species has ever been to the planet. And I could go into a whole spiel on that, but that is clearly not what we're doing here. But at the same time, we all are living here for a purpose. So therefore, we should be trying to do our best. And in a way, we all do need each other. So you can't just get rid of an entire species without a chain effect with everything else. And in the case of Floronic Man, he was trying to get rid of every living thing outside of plants, which clearly is not going to work. So he then is stripped of his ability to feel all of the plants from around the world, and he doesn't hear those voices anymore. And he's defeated and basically just like crawls off, and Swamp Thing lets him go, which I thought was very big of him. And in a way, that is what shows us that he isn't just a true monster in the sense that we would normally say that monster term, that they have no, I guess you could call it humanity, but that they don't have any sense of, you could say, like responsibility to those. And so he stopped the problem, he educated Floronic Man, and he let him go. And I thought that was really big of Swamp Thing and shows that he is still a good being. He's not a person, but he's still a good being, even without having that Alec Holland side to him. All of that does take us through the next chapter, which is called Roots. And at the very end of that, Floronic Man does try to spray on his spray, and it doesn't work because he has let the plant parts of himself grow out too much, so it makes his skin not stick fully to him, and he just looks So creepy, so incredibly gross. Like your skin's just melting from your body. And the Justice League pick him up and they're going to take him off to Arkham. So that's the last we see of Floronic Man, at least for now. I'm not sure if we'll see him back again in the other books. The next chapter, which is called The Sleep of Reason. So we see this man who has red hair and a streak of white through it, and he can tell people things about themselves that they probably wish they didn't know, but it is bad things. And it'll be like, yes, next month you're going to die, and this is how. It's like, holy crap, how does he know this stuff? And he's dealing with a Ouija board and some pentagrams, so there's something going on with him. Abby and Swamp Thing also seem to have a renewed friendship. So they hang out together. She also tells him that she has picked up a job over at this institution for children that have some mental problems, who have been through some trauma, and she's going to be helping out there with them. Of course, her husband Matt is not happy with that because that takes her away from him. I'm not really sure what he's doing outside of just sitting at home and drinking all the time and envisioning women. I don't know. Seems like that's all he does. But Abby meets this boy Paul, and Paul is really into spelling correctly, which is good. It's a good skill to have. Especially in 1982, you didn't have spell check, so yeah, it's nice. He has these drawings of this white, all white, little furry, kind of primate-esque looking creature, and says that if you spell incorrectly, the monster will come for you, and that's what killed his parents. And Abby's like, oh, okay, great. And he's like, I don't like you, you're like a witch. She does have all white hair, so maybe that was why. There isn't any other indication that she is a witch in this, so I'm not sure. We find out that the man with the red hair and the white streak is Jason Blood, and he meets up with Abby. He runs into her and he wants to talk to her, and she's like, no, I don't want to talk to you, because it's some random guy on the street, and she's attractive, so she probably gets, hit on all the time like that. At the very end of that chapter, we see that the white furry primate creature has come back and Paul is seeing him, and there's talk of the creature needing a master and wanting orders from that, and until he gets orders from his master, he's just going to be chaotic. I think there once again is a theme of purpose in this. Is we all need to have a true purpose in life, otherwise we flounder and we don't really know what it is that we're supposed to be doing. And that can be shown in a multitude of different ways. I think you see that with Matt Cable, Abby's husband. He has a drinking problem. He's not working. Abby is incredibly anxious. So she gets a job to maybe focus in her anxiety and do something constructive with it. You saw Swamp Thing lose his purpose when he found out that he is Alec Holland. But he regains it when he realizes that there might be the Justice League out there protecting the big cities and the mass populations, but who's protecting the small towns and the swamps? And that's him. So that gives him a new purpose. Floronic Man thought he had a purpose. It wasn't a good one and it wasn't right. So he lost his, and he is now in Arkham. There is that sense that everyone needs something to focus on that is proactive and productive, which I believe is true in life. Finally, we get to chapter 7, the second to last chapter. It's a time of running. Swamp Thing's feeling something. Something's coming. Also, back at the school where Abby's working, children have all drawn these photos, and they look very, very similar. They're all of the, I don't know why I always keep doing this, but I think he's about this tall. the white primate, Paul's creature, the fear, and it feeds off of fear, and all the children are acting up. You see the orderlies trying to calm them all down. They're trying to get new mattresses because children have soiled them, and it's just chaotic when Abby gets into the place, and really she hasn't been working there for very long. She goes to talk to Paul to see if he knows anything, and he says a little something, but he's like, no one's gonna believe me. And she's like, I believe you, Paul. So she goes and gets Swamp Thing, and they head back to the facility. And by the time that they get there, it is utter chaos. The children are freaking out. They feel like there's monsters everywhere, not really sure what's real, what's not real. They're just trying to get to them. And then we see this guy, and he is yellow with a cape, an all red costume. He looks very devilish, bat-like. It's pretty cool. Not Batman, but you know, kind of has that look. His name is Etrigan, and he says everything in rhymes, so that was kind of fun to read. He is there, and he wants to take the little creature guy and eat him. At the same time, you've got Matt, who's decided to have some drunk courage and go out after Abby, and has decided, you know, I'm not going to let her run around on her own anymore. I'm actually going to go do something. So he grabs the keys. Again, drunk. Don't drive drunk, because, of course, this is what happens. He hits a tree, and he should be dead, but he's not. Not that I wanted him dead, but, you know, whatever. We then get to the very last chapter, and Swamp Thing and Etrigan and the white creature all have this awesome battle between each other. So they're all going after the little white creature guy, but of course, because of fear, he's grown to be bigger. So he's even more difficult to take on, and Swamp Thing's like, get Paul and the children out of here, just go. The same time, we see this, looks like a fly, but it comes up to Matt, and again, he's crashed his car, comes up to him, and he's like, are you real? And he's like, what's real? What does it matter? No. And he says, you don't want to die. And Matt's like, no, I don't want to die. I've got Abby. I want to live for Abby. And he says, well, you don't have to. And then he goes inside his mouth. So I don't know what the hell is going to happen from there, but that I'm sure will be answered in the next book, because we don't see anything more of Matt. Etrigan is going to go after Paul because he believes that Paul is the reason that the ape, the white ape, the monkey thing, is alive. So he believes that if he takes out Paul, then he'll take out the fear primate. In true It fashion, he says that he's not afraid of the creature. He's like, you might have killed my mother and father, but I'm not afraid of you. I'm more afraid of kittens than I am of you. And as he's saying all of this, the creature just gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it's in his hands, and it's just this little thing in there. And Etrigan takes it and eats it. And he's happy with it because the thing is defeated. So he got what he wanted. He's not going to kill Paul. He goes off into the woods. But he says something before he leaves. He says, the answer, madam, is for you to know. I've said too much. My job is done. I go. He says that to Abby. Abby is like, wait, what do you mean by that? So she goes out after him into the swamp, which I don't think is the smartest idea, but I don't think Abby's that smart to begin with, to be honest. Paul and Swamp Thing have a moment, and Paul basically says, you know, thank you to him for helping me and saving everyone. And he asks him, were you scared? And Swamp Thing says, yes. And Paul's like, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool when monsters are afraid of things too. And again, I think that just shows that while Swamp Thing isn't Alec Holland, isn't a human whatsoever, still has human aspects to him. So I'm excited to see where else this is going to go. I have not read a lot of Swamp Thing, but I obviously have not read Alan Moore's version of it. I do plan to cover the next book, the next 5 books. So let me know what you thought about Swamp Thing. Let me know your thoughts in general on the messaging that Swamp Thing does have. That is something I do like about Alan Moore quite a lot, is his commentary that he has in all of his stories. I Obviously felt like this was a 5 out of 5 for the story, and the art I would give a 4 out of 5. There were a few frames that it was difficult to tell exactly what was going on. They were very artsy and really cool, but it wouldn't always be in the stereotypical normal of panel. There were jagged lines, which was really cool to read, but it did make it a little bit harder sometimes to find, okay, where am I going on this page, because it's kind of all over. Overall, of course I'm gonna sleeve it. You always sleeve an Alan Moore. Duh. Let me know, what is your favorite Alan Moore comic? Have you read Swamp Thing? Until next time, this has been Victoria with Merlin's Vault.